We are chatting with Luci. Her YouTube channel is Blue Moon Red Wine. Definitely recommend you subscribe to it. And yeah, and we're both members of the INN, the Indian News Network. So thank you for coming on the channel today, Luci.
Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome.
Thank you for waking up early. And I apologize.
It's okay. No worries. No worries. Yeah, so we were just chatting before we went live, and you said you hadn't heard about this singing nurses at the White House story that I wanted to get your perspective on. So I will scroll through here and share that because I thought it was pretty interesting and just very much kind of in character for Biden, or just kind of liberals, or you could say conservatives in general. They have these kind of meaningless gestures that are kind of meant to distract from any type of meaningful change that they're not actually trying to help people. And I'm just trying to scroll through all of these tabs. Here we go. Okay, have open. Okay, so here are the singing nurses. I'm not going to play all of it, but these are singing nurses that the Bidens invited to the White House for whatever reason. Seems kind of odd, but yeah. So we'll play a little bit of this, and then yeah.
Wait, do they sing and dance? Is that why they're standing?
It looks like it. Yeah, I haven't actually watched it. I just saw that this clip was going around. I just thought it was really ridiculous, but very much in character for, kind of Democratic politicians to have, these singing nurses to the White House. Like, how does that actually help people or improve their lives? It doesn't, but it's like just that, this distraction. So.
The tree before my spirit falls again. Fill up the stockings. I might be rushing things, but deck the halls again
now. There's Joe Biden in the background.
down the chimney, put up the brightest tree of lights I've ever seen. My stuff, the fruitcake, it's stuck on some tinsel on that evergreen For I roll a little later, roll a little colder, roll a little sadder, roll a little older, and I need a little later, sitting on my shoulder.
I like the song.
Yeah, so that was the singing nurses at the White House. Yeah, so what did you think about that?
I mean, it's just pandering, I guess, as usual. The sad thing is, I feel like we always make fun of these things, but at the same time, like, we shouldn't deny the fact that it does have I feel like that this kind of pandering thing, as much as people are like, oh, it's so transparent, they're so obviously distracting from the fact that they're not doing anything, blah blah blah, it still works.
Yeah,
it still works because people like during the Trump administration, Trump was so brutal and stuff when he made his speeches, and I feel like people do want to go back to sleep. They do want to see something nice once in a while, and it might be super cheesy, and people might even know that it's a lie, but it's you don't want to constantly assault yourself with realities about the world and stuff. So I feel like it's still effective, sadly.
Yeah, no, I agree. It definitely is effective, and that I had seen the clip before, but I hadn't watched it. And I mean, it was pleasant enough to watch. They seemed happy. They were singing this Christmas song, whatever it was. Pretty good choreography. It was interesting though that only like some of them were wearing masks, and it seemed like only like the white nurse ladies were wearing masks, but like the other people weren't. And so that, I don't know, that was
So
kind of
much for the Karen myth, I guess.
exactly. Yeah. So it's like, I mean, yes, it's a nice distraction, but imagine like if, you know, Biden through various executive orders was actually also doing stuff, you know, to help people. Yeah. And then, so yeah, I wanted to, so you were one of the organizers of the student debt boycott marathon that happened a couple weeks ago. And I guess I just wanted to maybe pick your brain a little bit for kind of some of the, you know, biggest takeaways that you took from, you know, from that event, and maybe a little bit of, you know, some of the work that kind of went into organizing it. Cause there was like, you know, 8 or 9 hours of different panels and a lot of people involved, and it just seems like probably, you know, a huge amount of work kind of went into, you know, planning and organizing that.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway, and I'm not even that young, but the biggest takeaway is to like watch it and listen to the boycott marathon, because it includes a lot of information by like older organizers, like people that have been fighting this like longer than us.
Yeah.
Because like the first crop of like student debt organizers are at least 20, 30, like even 40 years older than us. And those are people that are currently like retiring with debt. So basically, the biggest thing to understand is like to not kind of rework the wheel and just learn from what they already did.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they've kind of already decided, like a lot of the older organizers, is that a lot of these debts are unpayable. Over 80% of the country can't make their payments. They purposefully like skew and like publish like statistics saying that like more people are paying than they actually are. So we're already like pretty near a boycott. Now the way to do that is basically like the first thing we have to do that's like really important is call our like representatives and ask for the return of bankruptcy rights. And the reason that that's really important is because bankruptcy is actually a constitutional right. Like the founders of our country basically called for bankruptcy rights ahead of the right to raise an army. And the reason for that is because like at the time we were heavily indebted to England, because debt is like a method of control. Yeah. So especially unpayable debts, debts that aren't fixed and that have interest that like gets capitalized over time. The purpose of those debts is for them to be unpayable.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, a small business loan with a reasonable rate that you can pay back over time. That's not what student debt is. Mm-hmm. So like the like more people understand that it's like a fundamental freedom, kind of, I feel like the more it'll resonate like all around. Yeah. And then the second thing is that for federal loans, and 90% of debt is federally owned, all of that has been paid. So like basically like the reason that you can forgive student debt is because most of this debt is owed directly to the government. It's like an extra tax. And during the like 2 consecutive recessions, the government bailed out the banks. So whoever's lending money to you, they've gotten paid. Mm-hmm. The schools, they've gotten paid. The administrators, professors, whatever, they've gotten paid. Facilities, they've gotten paid. The government is getting paid like through tax money. The only person that's not getting paid here is you. Like that's what people have to understand. And then the third thing is, so like that's why the debt is forgivable, because most of it is owed to the federal government. Mm-hmm. There is a small percentage of it that is owed to private lenders, and that debt is super predatory too. but that's a minority of the debt.
Yeah.
So that's like, like the big thing is that it's like a fundamental freedom, that these debts are unpayable debts, that they're built that way. And it's not the only debt that's predatory. There's like other types of debt that are predatory, like like credit card debt, bail bonds, that's super predatory. All these kinds of things. But basically, Spoiled Bread says, don't panic. Yeah, don't panic. You can boycott if you want to. Federal loans go into default after 270 days. So basically, that's way past May. You have like basically until October to make your first payment, if you want, for federal loans. For private loans, you have to check because those might go into default either right away or there's a few that are like after 3 months. I'm not exactly sure. You'll have to like look into that. And then the final thing is that we should actually be marching for student debt relief. There's a march that I think hasn't really been that well advertised by Debt Collective in DC on January 18th.
Okay.
And that people really have to show up to those marches. Like the older student debt organizers weren't able to really get people to march. It was like millions and millions of people signed this petition. But then he would, like, Alan College had like, from Student Loan Justice, he had a petition that like 5 million people signed. And then he tried to organize a march and 50 people showed up. And it was like, where's the people? So compared to like the Black Lives Matter, whatever, the Black Lives, I didn't mean to say whatever, I'm just like a bad talker. Compared to that, the student debt movement has been like, it's like fairly difficult to mobilize. And that's part of why we haven't seen that much movement on it. And that's one of the big differences between what's happening here and what's happening in Chile. What happened in Chile is that the student debt movement in this country, it kind of got channeled into electoral politics and into the Bernie campaign, like all of the energy of the student debt movement. And then when that failed, it like didn't regroup into something like more direct action, like where we could actually see results. So at least there's people now that are talking about like a strike, a boycott.
Yep.
But we also kind of need to get out there. 100%. So yeah.
And then, Bill Bradley says, I'm on disability, and even that isn't enough to get out from under student loan debt. I'm on an income-based repayment, but if I miss refiling the paperwork, they will garnish my disability to pay the loan. Yeah, that's just...
So if you're facing like wage garnishment, maybe that's like not a good idea to boycott, because then they'll get more money from you if you do. But you could, if you have the chance to ask your employer to get paid with like a 1099, they can't garnish your wages if you do that.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that Alan said was that if they, come to your employer, if you're not one of those 1099 contractors, if they come to your employer, you could tell your employer to tell them to come back with a court order to garnish your wages to, if you're not paying your student loan debt. And, depending on who your employer is, who your boss is, maybe that's something they would agree to. I mean, if I was, somebody's boss or something and they came to me with that, I was like, yes, of course. I would tell them to come back with a court order. I'm just not going to let them, garnish your wages to pay this, ridiculous, student loan debt that we shouldn't have. And then, I think it's a really good point you made about the bankruptcy laws. I think it's the Senate bill is like S2598 right now that everybody should definitely be contacting their senators about, because it would grant some bankruptcy protections to student loan borrowers. And just even having, the threat of being able to file for bankruptcy for student loan debt would more than likely force the, the federal government to cancel some student loan debt, right?
Yeah.
And then so yeah, and then, recently Biden, I think it was last week, his administration announced they would be pausing the student loan debt payments for another 3 months. So I think it would start in May. So again, just kind of kicking the can down the road a little bit, while he has, complete discretion to cancel all of it. He campaigned on canceling 10,000 of it, which again is just, kind of a drop in the bucket, frankly, when some people have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. Some people end up, dying with student loan debt. And then it's, also if you was to cancel all of it, it would be a, targeted form of universality, meaning it's a universal program that, disproportionately benefits, communities of color, women, groups who, just historically have to get, more student loan debt due to things like the, racial wealth gap or the gender, pay gap.
Yeah, and
Like
that's
that.
really important too, because like the Democrats, they definitely like used identity politics all the way, almost like on purpose to ensure that like it wouldn't be a popular policy. Like, do you remember when like Kamala Harris came out and she was like, let's forgive student loan debt for historically Black colleges and universities? Or, and it's like, well, not all Black people go to historical Black colleges or universities. I mean, I think it would be great if they did that. They haven't. But, it's almost like they do it to provoke, or almost like because they want it to not happen. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then she came out with like, oh, we'll forgive a certain percentage of your debt, but only if you open a business for 5 years in an underserved community. And it's like, but if you don't have money to pay your debt, why would you have the money to open the business for 5 years in an underserved community? It's just like, so that one was like outrageous. She did that before the election too. It wasn't even after, like, while she was like still trying to get elected.
Yeah, it's not super surprising that what her approval rating is in like the 28%, even lower than Biden's at like 41%. But from my perspective, they could be obviously doing all of these things without congressional approval through like executive action, whether it's canceling student loan debt or giving everybody, health care through the Social Security Act, or, not trying to extradite Julian Assange, or, legalizing, marijuana, like all of these things that are, hugely popular, they're not doing. And, from my perspective, it's because they don't really, neither party, obviously Republicans too, don't serve the interests of the, working class of the majority of people. Like they serve their corporate donors. So it's not really even about, winning elections or, gaining favor with the voters, because no matter what kind of party's in, like the corporations, the capitalist class are going to be doing, really well. What do you think about that?
I mean, yeah, it's weird, like how like they can do all of these things just with the position of the president. So like we live in a very authoritarian world still. Like, sure, it's not the same as having a king, but if you think about like all of the power, the stuff that they have to do with just one person, like the president could do so much by himself. So all of these excuses about like Joe Manchin and like whatever, like he can do so much himself. He doesn't. It's just stupid to blame like someone that has a lower position, and everybody knows it. Like it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense anymore. I feel like, but like I do think that there's a lot of like kind of more professional middle class Democrats that really like to like look into the. I'm not one of those people at all. Not because I'm just like not interested in the like minutia of government, like how many senators or like or like I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about? But there's a lot of like kind of more professional Democrats that like to think about things that way, and they'll like look into, but I have a hard trouble explaining myself. It's like kind of a product of overthink. Like the more you know about how government is supposed to work ideally, like the less you can see like the simple stuff, like how it's actually working, and it's just like doesn't work. So
yeah. No, I think a lot of those, people, like they just wanted to get Trump out of office, and now they're, kind of back to brunch, if you will, even though Biden, has almost continued that same agenda as Trump. Like, I think, Biden is basically Trump 2.0, but with liberal, messaging and marketing. But those people don't really have anything to say, like about, the kids in cages, or, as many people have died from COVID-19 now under the Biden administration as did under Trump. Biden, ratcheting up U.S., imperialism, or, keeping it the same towards Cuba, or, Nicaragua, and all of these other different countries that want to kind of chart their own course, or Ethiopia, or just in general. That's why, like, I could have never brought myself, I guess, to vote for Joe Biden, was because of how I just knew that, U.S. imperialism would definitely, continue under a Biden administration. That's definitely, unfortunately, but unsurprisingly, kind of been proven to be true. Do you think there's any futility in actually, trying to change the Democratic Party from like within, or should, at least from the electoral side, like definitely need to focus on, building up a third party movement to force, the Republican and Democratic parties to come to the left a little bit, and, support and kind of pass some policies that would actually help, the working class here?
So maybe I'll just start by being honest and say that I was a Democrat, like for a long time. Like I didn't look that deeply into politics my entire life, and it just seemed like the Democrats were better, and I kind of bought that story for a long time. I think there's a point, like, and other Americans have reached this point like much earlier than me, maybe because they're older or have like more experience with the system, or maybe just because they're smarter and like woke themselves up to it earlier, whatever the case might be. But there's like a point where like the parties kind of stagnate, and we're definitely past that point, and so there's nothing that we can really do like right now with the Democratic Party, because it's a lost cause at this point. I'm not saying that it never was. Like, I can understand that there's people that are like super loyal to the Democratic Party because maybe they did something good when they were young. The Democratic Party has done some good things, I'm sure, like in the past, as has the Republican Party, like maybe like a select few things. But that does, it's like completely stagnant. By the way, like one of the things the Republicans did, which like some people and some people say it's for racist reasons, but like maybe this isn't the time to like talk about that. But the Republicans were the only ones to pass a sweeping amnesty law. In 1981, Ronald Reagan passed the immigration amnesty law for like 11 million immigrants. And like my mother benefited from that. Like I know a lot of people that benefited from that law. So the last immigration amnesty, like the Democrats can talk all day about the kids in cages, but it was actually Republicans that passed that. Like, I'm not saying that Reagan was great. Like he also like created a lot of the problems that we see today. But this isn't like, I think like if we get the Republicans back in, it's not like we won't be able to get anything accomplished under the Republicans. Just, like I don't believe in the fear mongering anymore. Like I used to think the Democrats were better, but I've kind of lost that attitude. And like even up until the last election, I thought it might be good to like vote for Democrats for local office because like I didn't vote for Joe Biden, but then I realized they don't do anything either. Like we like horrible. Even there's like no choices anymore. So and you know, especially if you live in like a red state or a blue state where it's not going to go to the other party anyway. I think it's better to just vote for some kind of third party, and I don't even think it really matters like what party that is at this point. Just like anything that like breaks the um you know, like the control that they have. So I don't know.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, from my perspective, it's definitely like you know, a lost cause to try to create social change from within the Democratic Party. You know, I don't remember who said it, but probably a lot of people have. It's like you know, the Democratic Party is kind of the death of these various, you know, social movements. And a lot of these you know, like squad members, when they're like campaigning, they talk all this you know, kind of activist rhetoric, and how about talking about how they would be okay just being like a one-term congressperson, and then yet, you know, either it was by design or necessity. Once they get into office, it's, well, it kind of got to go along to get along. You know, got to defer to party leadership on this issue. You know, AOC referring to like Nancy Pelosi as Mama Bear and all that stuff. This was about a different topic, but somebody said, you know, if people were an actual threat to these systems, they wouldn't get into these positions of power to begin with. So, and I think that is, you know, fairly true. And I definitely, you know, think Bernie could be, you know, further left on a lot of things, particularly U.S. imperialism. But he, I think, at least would have, you know, canceled student loan debt, legalized or decriminalized, you know, marijuana through executive order. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why the Democratic establishment worked so hard, but behind the scenes, to prop up, you know, Jim Crow Joe, right? Joe Biden. And then, you know, kind of we're stuck with him at this point. And I mean, there are 95 members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, and their leader, you know, Pramila Jayapal, was like, yeah, just, you know, all this rhetoric. We trust, you know, Joe Biden to make sure we get, you know, Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema on board to pass Build Back Better while they passed, you know, that infrastructure plan. And we kind of seen how that has played out. Now it's, you know, Joe Manchin is this, you know, rotating villain character at this point, when you know, there's plenty of blame to go around, right? I don't know. So it's, yeah. What do you think about that?
I mean, I feel like Joe Biden was like an unforgivable nominee. It's definitely like what caused me, you know, and I know that other people were like disappointed with the Democratic Party from way before, but for me, Joe Biden was like the end. Like, there's no way I could vote for this person. It's over. Like, this is over for me. And Joe Biden, like, you know, it's funny because like there's still a lot of Democrats that have this idea that it's like neoliberalism is better than fascism or whatever. But that's not who Joe Biden is. Joe Biden isn't just a neoliberal. He's like always in the middle. Like, he's been behind every war. It's not just about the fact that he's fiscally conservative or the fact that he's cutting benefits. You know, he is like one of the most brutal warmongers that we've had like in recent history. He was involved in Plan Colombia. He was involved in the drug war, the crime bill.
Yep.
And he's actually ramping things up heavily, like way more than Trump did. Like, I don't know if you remember when Trump like assassinated that Soleimani guy in Iran, but then like everyone came out to protest and it was put on pause. That's not happening under Joe Biden. Everything is going like full force. They're in Ethiopia. They assassinated the president of Haiti. Now they're like, you know, trying to infiltrate in like Nicaragua. Like, they're trying to get involved with Peru. Like, you know, like they're all over the place. Joe Biden is like, and they're like ramping things up with China. They're like trying to provoke You know, just like putting up feelers in the media about like, should we go to war with China? It's like, China, you shouldn't go to war with China because they'll kick your ass. Like, you know, like this is not a good idea. Like, this is like, China is like the richest country in the world right now. I don't know if you know that Rockefeller Center was like bought off by the Chinese like years ago, like over 10 years ago. So like all of the Carnegies, like all of the things that are like used to be like the center of wealth here, a lot of these like buildings, cultural centers, whatever, have been bought off by the Chinese. They have a lot of money. You're not going to win that war. So I think Americans, you know, like I think this is a great country, but there's a certain point where like people kind of get off on this ego, you know, like just because we've like you know, won previous wars or whatever. First of all, if we win, it'll be a Pyrrhic victory. Like Afghanistan, we were there for so long. What did we do? Spend all of our money like destroying these places. These things have a cost, like a human cost, like a fiscal cost, and like that's why I feel like I would never compare, like when people are like, oh, it's like neoliberalism versus fascism. That might be the case if it was like a smaller country where it's like that's, you know, like a country that's not the center of the empire, where the choices are like fiscally conservative versus whatever, like someone that's like more authoritarian. That might make sense. But in the US, they're both invading several countries at once, no matter like what party you choose. So this is like not the same as just like kind of this like fiscal conservative ideology. Like they're both like so in bed with the military, and like so and they use it to prop up the value of the dollar. So like I don't really think of it that way. Like I feel like the Democrats are extremely aggressive. You know, like I can see why people do, because like Bush was kind of the one that invaded Iraq for, you know, like we didn't have peace before, but it was like a short period of relative peace, like internationally under the Clintons, even though they were in Yugoslavia and stuff, but that was like a smaller entanglement, whatever. And that one actually wasn't like, it was not the worst of our interventions. Like, you know, apparently like there were some people that supported it for certain reasons. I don't know. I'm not going to get into it right now, but I can see people thinking of the Republicans as the ones that provoked a lot of this. But like, I don't, at this point, it's like after Iraq, like the Democrats were in office, they did Libya, they did Syria, you know, like now Joe Biden's like in Haiti, and like, I don't know, they're like all over the place. There's no difference between them. There really isn't.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And yeah, you brought up like how, you know, the Biden administration is, you know, ramping up kind of this new Cold War on China in a lot of different ways, and how we're hearing, you know, corporate media, they'll have on these like retired generals talking about how we would need to like, go to war with China if they invaded Taiwan or something like that. You know, when basically to my understanding, centuries or even longer, like Taiwan has been a, you know, part of China more or less. So, and then, I think it's also very interesting to, you know, Biden signed this bill banning imports from the Xinjiang region of China just last week due to concerns over, you know, quote unquote forced labor of the, you know, Uyghur Muslim population there. And also the Biden administration, you know, has been using this rhetoric about, you know, genocide happening there against the Uyghur Muslims, which was also happening under Trump. That same, you know, rhetoric of genocide, which is, you know, hugely, which is a huge claim to make when I haven't seen any credible evidence to support that. Like the only sources that I've seen are like this far right Christian fanatical, like Adrian Zenz. His work has been completely debunked, or the, ASPI, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. They get their funding from the military industrial complex and these different, Western governments that kind of benefit from, ramping up tensions with China. And I think, it's also very revealing. We signed this bill, banning imports from, forced labor in, Xinjiang region of China, and yet the United States has the world's largest prison population. There are huge corporations in the United States that use literal, slave labor,
yeah.
prison labor. So where's all the concern from Democrats or Republicans about that? I mean, again,
well,
but I mean,
that's more it. Like the hypocrisy is like more the point. It's not that China's perfect. Like,
yeah.
Actually, like when I was like 21 years old, I was an English teacher in China.
Cool.
And like, I don't really bring it up with people that are like kind of communists, basically. Like, there's a lot of like people that identify as communist. I don't. But like, there's people that do, and there's like reasons for it. Like, part of the reason I don't is because I do go to church. Like, I consider myself like moderately religious. So, and like Marx was, he said like religion is the opium of the people or whatever. So I don't agree with that. But I actually went to Xinjiang. Like, I went on like a little road trip with a friend, and the general impression, like, they are over there like a minority, and they're Muslim, right? In a country like a communist country that basically tried to eradicate religion, especially among the like kind of religious minorities. So they actually, like, most people there don't like the Han Chinese, like they don't like the majority, and they complain a lot about like different kinds of discrimination and stuff. And there are probably prisons, like I've heard that the Chinese are using some of the same contractors that the US used in Afghanistan. So these are, China is definitely not as aggressive. It's not like an aggressive empire in the same way as the United States. It's definitely not a genocide, but there's definitely tension between like the kind of the cultural minorities and like the majority in China. And what the West does is it kind of manipulates that tension. And we're not saying that, it isn't true that there is like, China's perfect, or that there isn't mistreatment of like minorities in China. What we're saying is, like, what I would say is that it's extremely hypocritical for a country that is invading like over half of the world and is extremely like aggressive in its like military, military intervention, to be like kind of nitpicking on the flaws of other countries, and like and acting like this is like the reason that we have to intervene, because that's like what they want to do. They want to justify like American intervention in China using this like kind of red herring of a like alleged genocide. Doesn't mean that there isn't mistreatment of like people there, but there isn't a genocide. The justification for intervention is wrong. So and I feel like when you talk about it that way, it's more serious, because when people are like, oh no, people in Xinjiang are happy and like they love China and they love Chinese communism, I feel like those arguments are kind of less taken seriously. Like like if you explain it in a way that like people understand, it's like, okay, but we have our own minorities, right? And we have our own prison population here. And did you know that the prison population here is even higher than over there? That then you're saying it in like a language that people understand. It's not like you're not being like a partisan hack and acting like, communism is great and the solution. That's the way I would frame it. But like, that's my personal opinion. I'm not saying like other people don't have the right to have like their own yeah, so I agree with you. Like, and we have like forced labor here, and like several politicians that have been tied up in it. And they were even like and at Rikers they forced them to like bury the bodies.
Oh yeah, I heard
like
about that.
of all of the people that died during the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, and also like if the U.S. empire is really concerned about promoting human rights or democracy, like they wouldn't be giving billions in weapons contracts to the apartheid state of Israel, or supporting Saudi Arabia's genocide, literal genocide they're committing in Yemen by all the billions in weapons contracts that were giving to Saudi Arabia. That was obviously happening under the Trump administration. It's also happening under the Biden administration as well. So again, like you said, it's just about hypocrisy, right? And just doing it to kind of promote the interests of the U.S. empire, and obviously benefits the military industrial complex to kind of build up this new Cold War with China, because then these defense contractors can go to their puppets in Congress and say, oh yeah, we need this new long range nuclear submarine to counter China's aggression in the South China Sea, or whatever it is, right? And actually, yeah, I would really want to hopefully visit China one day. I think it'd be really amazing country just to go to, like talk to the people there, see how they're living, and to kind of combat all of this kind of propaganda, I guess, that we're fed in the U.S. about China or Cuba or Nicaragua or any of these other places that are kind of demonized by the U.S. government and the corporate media as well. And I do think it's very revealing also. Like, I almost feel like maybe one of the reasons they're ratcheting up or trying to ratchet up tensions against China right now is because of how well they've handled the pandemic compared to the United States. I think the last time I looked, it was less than like 6,000 people had died from COVID-19 in China. In the United States, it's over 800,000 people, and China doesn't have any vaccine mandates, and the U.S. like does, and yet, or is trying to, and yet we still have hundreds of thousands of people dead from it. And I think
I'm actually not sure if like the figures that they publish are true 100%. It also, like, it's like a country with like it's like one of the most populated countries on earth, and I'm not sure, even though it's like a very wealthy country at this point, I'm not sure they have the capacity to measure every death or like every I don't know if that makes sense. So I wouldn't really go by the figures there, but yeah, they definitely deal with it better than we do, because they have a public health system, which is like the way you should run medical care. Like, they have a public health system. No one's going into debt because of coronavirus. Like, it's just like, so I don't know. So like, on the one hand, it's great that they have a public health system that like works better than ours. On the other hand, I'm not sure if I would trust their like stats, or to be honest with their stats, or to even have collected all that information like accurately. So that's
yeah, I mean, I think even if they, I don't know, don't necessarily have that ability, which I would think they do, but you could be right on that. I definitely think they've definitely handled it a lot better than the United States
yes.
has. And yeah, like you said, one of the reasons for that is we don't have, a public healthcare system. It's designed to maximize profit, hence why, hospital beds have decreased while the population has increased over the past, several decades. That's kind of problematic. Also a reason why, these private for-profit hospitals in the United States don't have extra, medical supplies or ventilators on hand. So that's also kind of another one of the reasons, right, why the hospitals have been kind of maxed out or over capacity at some point with, people who have gotten, COVID-19 and developed these serious, complications with it. And, I think, it just kind of shows that, they make the COVID-19 vaccine free. Okay, do that for, all pharmaceutical drugs. Do that for healthcare at large. Because again, it's like, I think 68,000 people in the US die each year because they don't have healthcare. And yet we couldn't even move that issue forward during a pandemic. To me, that just again shows kind of how skewed to the right the political system is in the United States.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, part of it too is like, this is just like a minor thing, but China's extremely crowded, especially like Eastern China. Like the urban areas are like 10 times as crowded as New York City. Like I live in one of the most populated areas of this country, but like it's like a joke compared to China. Like it's like very unpopulated, or like the amount of space that you have when you walk around the street and stuff. It's just like it's very crowded over there. And people have already been used to wearing masks since before. Like people wore it under SARS. There was like SARS 1 and SARS 2, and they also wear it for pollution.
Okay.
So like it really wasn't very difficult to like convince the Chinese to like wear a mask. It was like kind of part of their daily life already, and that's also part of why they're able to like contain the spread of some of these like airborne diseases like really easily. So it's not like there's no concept of this like personal freedom. Like in the US, it was like the first time anybody had ever asked somebody to wear a mask. Over there, it was just like a routine part of life. So that's like part of it too. They were able to contain it quickly because people like, it's just like they were accustomed to that. So
I always find it interesting because I'm in Washington State, and you're still supposed to wear a mask when you go into like grocery stores or whatever. But I just find it very interesting when I see people not wearing them. I just feel like, I don't know, I just feel like it's like a common courtesy, like almost like concern for other people, not wanting to spread it to somebody, not wanting to give it to somebody who might have like an immune compromised like family member or something like that. But I think it just really goes to also like the very individualistic nature of the United States at this settler colonial state, all about kind of individual freedom, and what's best for me is that's all that matters, like kind of fuck everybody else type of mentality. And it this kind of made me think about like the mask issue that you were talking about.
Yeah, like I feel like culturally we're very different, and a lot of the more Republican areas where people are like more anti-mask, they're also more rural. Like you don't need a mask if like you're like 10 feet away from the closest person, like 20 yards away, possibly even like 3 miles away from the closest person. so if people are telling you that like masks are ridiculous, and kind of, I feel like what they're saying is more like in the context of their culture, like the situation that they're living in, maybe it is ridiculous. Maybe for them it is ridiculous because it's just not the same to like compare like really crowded urban areas to like the suburbs, or like that's how I see it. Like, and like I don't wear a mask when I leave New York. Like basically I wear it on the subway because that is a situation where it's like crowded and like uncomfortable. Like a lot of people in this country don't even take the subway. They don't ever take a train or whatever. So like it's very different. Like I don't really blame anyone for like finding it ridiculous, whatever like situation they might be in. And it's a little grosser to me if you're like, even the grocery stores, like when I leave New York and I see the grocery stores, there's like huge lanes, like is that what the grocery store is like where you live? There's just like, it's like there's like so much space, there's like huge lanes, you could like drive a car through the aisle.
I mean, maybe not quite drive a car through, but like you could maybe, like if one person is on one side of the aisle and somebody else is on the other, you'd maybe least the grocery stores around here, maybe have like 3 or 4 feet between each other, something like that, maybe.
Yeah.
At least, yeah, from just thinking about it abstractly. No, you got to go soon, so I just wanted to, yeah, get your kind of perspective on the recent elections in Chile that Boric, I'm probably mispronouncing the last name. He's now will become the new president of Chile. I think he's more of like a kind of social Democrat, right? Maybe not as good on issues of imperialism, but pretty good on issues of kind of domestic, internal kind of economic issues and politics. But yeah, so I just wanted to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I'm like super interested in this topic. I might go over unless you have to go.
That's all right.
But yeah, so like Gabriel Boric, like he won. So basically, I feel like what people are like, Chile, oh, it's like another South American country, whatever. But it's not really just another South American country. It's like a country that's like super similar to the U.S. in a lot of ways, and that's why I feel like it's really important to talk about it. Basically, Chile, like during the Pinochet era, they the U.S., like economists from the U.S.,
Yep.
like in combination with Pinochet, implemented like basically an economic revolution. It was like implemented by the Chicago boys, who
Yep.
are like American economists, basically. And it was like they were very supportive of the free market, of like opening trade routes to other countries. Like lowering controls, tariffs, that kind of thing. Like basically libertarian, like like it was like Chile was like Milton Friedman's like wet dream, basically. And because of that, people have like kind of economic ideas that are very similar to people in the United States. There's a lot of people in Chile that are like near libertarians, like politically libertarian, kind of. It's not like any other Latin American country where, you know what I mean? It's not the same. So because of that, and like what people don't realize, like also, is that Pinochet, he is kind of idolized a little bit by people that have this like libertarian mindset. It's like, yes, he committed these human rights abuses, but he helped put Chile on a trajectory to like an economically vibrant country. It's like still one of the countries that's like basically one of the most economically successful countries in Latin America. So hooray capitalism, right? Like that's like the real mentality that people have. And under Pinochet, actually less people died than Argentina or Brazil or Nicaragua or Guatemala. So like these were all like, different kinds of like right-wing dictators in different countries, but actually the place where less people died was Chile. Less people were killed. So like there's a lot of people with this like libertarian mentality that think that it was kind of like a justified cost. I don't think so, but like that's the mentality that exists in Chile, and I think it's similar to the mentality that exists in the U.S. It's like, yes, we are like a warmongering empire that has like killed people all around the world, but at least we have like a free market economy where like capitalism works for the people, blah blah blah. So like that's like the bargaining mental game that people have in Chile, which I feel like is really similar to the mentality in the United States. It's like, okay, what's better than capitalism? Like, do you want to become Venezuela or Cuba? How people are like, and it's true. Like, Venezuela has had like very deep economic depressions. Part of that is because of international sanctions. Part of that is because they have like the resource curse, and they're like very, they have problems whenever the international like price of oil drops. And then part of it is because like the Bank of England is holding their money. But regardless, like it is a country with like deep economic volatility, you know? So like I feel like it doesn't really work. Like people might criticize Borg and say like from the outside, it's very easy. Like, oh, you shouldn't criticize the like shit talk about Venezuela or Cuba. You should respect the countries that like came before you. I even saw some like, you know, like more leftist types like say that Chile needs to respect Venezuela and Cuba, whatever. And I think that criticism is valid coming from like other Chileans. But when it comes from someone in the US, I feel like it doesn't really work as well to like say this because I feel like a lot of people don't really understand what happened in Chile. Like the fact that it was kind of this like libertarian experiment. That a lot of people have been brainwashed into this idea that like capitalism is really great. There's a lot of inequality, like just like in the US. But there's also like kind of a thriving economy. So it's kind of a mixed bag. It's like, what do you want? Do you want equality in a country that has like less money overall, or do you want inequality in a country where there's like at least opportunities to like get good jobs eventually? You know, like people have this like bargaining mentality with capitalism in Chile. So for that reason, it was like super necessary to, and I feel like it would be necessary in the US too, to have like a third party coalition where what you're focusing on is like bringing people together in Chile. You're not focusing on like becoming like the leftist dream for people that are like fans of Cuba or like, you know, like the party towards socialism in Bolivia or whatever. Like what they had to do was build a third party coalition that would like appeal to Chileans, and a lot of Chileans like capitalism. So like I still think like Borg is like far to the left of someone like AOC, because if you think about it, like they had to march in the street and create a third party coalition to bring Borg in. Borg is not AOC. He does not belong to the like their equivalent of the Democratic Party. Like they completely broke away from their from their duopoly, basically, in this election completely. They were marching. They had like they drafted a new constitution in order to be able to like elect this new round of people. So I think it's like super simplistic to be like, oh, they're like the AOC. He's like the AOC of Chile just because he like kind of said some shit about Chile not being Cuba and Venezuela. I think it's kind of a little bit of a strategy over there to say something like that, but we'll basically have to see what he actually does.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if he's shit talking just in order to like build this third party coalition, and like getting the people of Chile to understand like, no, we're not trying to be Cuba and Venezuela. We're trying to create our own third party coalition to improve our country. No, we're not trying to like disrupt the economic gains that we've made. We're just trying to like make like have more opportunities for more people in our country. And like that's like the kind of language that they use in Chile, and I feel like it's super interesting because it's very similar to what we would have to do here to a third party coalition that like appeals to different kinds of people, including libertarians. Like the libertarian kind of strain of thought is super strong in Chile too. So that's anyway. That's like why I thought it was like super important to discuss. And then the student debt movement there was like way more powerful because it didn't get rerouted into a campaign. It was basically like they marched for free college and they got it.
Oh wow. That's awesome.
Like, so like imagine that, like if you know, like, and I don't know, like I feel like a lot of the people that were in the like police brutality marches and stuff were also young. I feel like those marches weren't just about police brutality, but they kind of got like it was also about the fact that like there was like a recession last year, so people had time to protest, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like it's like an example of like a very libertarian leaning country that had to bring in a third party through like direct action and use a lot of the same language that we would use here. Like especially like the economic language, because not everyone is on board with this idea of like dismantling capitalism in our country. It just like doesn't sell. It's selling more and more for people in our generation because we're like fucked by student debt and like all of this shit. But like for older people, it doesn't really sell as much. So I don't know. Like I feel like we have to be a little respectful of that and like understand this is like a cultural quirk. Like and like, you know, we're not gonna be able to like be Cuba and Venezuela and like come out with this like strong left-wing language, and it's not going to sell. Like it's just like what they did in Chile, I feel like was really good, and it has a lot of similarities to I feel like I'm rambling on at this point, but if anyone doesn't know anything about Chile, definitely look into it, because it's just like there's a lot of relevant like parallels.
Yeah, because like you said, those economists from the US, the Chicago boys, went down there, and basically it was just an experiment in neoliberalism, right? Like privatization, deregulation. And it's also interesting too that you brought up they had to have this, you know, massive protest movement in the streets to, I think, get a constitutional amendment or to rewrite the Constitution. And then this kind of leftist coalition was able to come together, and then Boric was able to get elected. And I think you made a good point. Like it might make more sense in like the US context to not, you know, necessarily campaign for, let's say, socialism or communism, but on the policies like giving everybody healthcare, which, you know, is like a form of kind of, you know, socialism, socialized medicine, right? Or canceling, you know, student loan debt, making college tuition free, you know, some type of Green New Deal, but maybe change the language so we have a inhabitable planet to live on, but trying to maybe decouple those, you know, policy issues from
the words.
From any type of like political ideology necessarily, while still pursuing policies that, you know, disproportionately help the, you know, working class, right?
And like,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Like I wanted to say that, well, like I know a lot of Chileans, but like I visited once. I'm not from there. I'm from New York City, and my parents are from Argentina, and like Argentina is like super similar to Chile culturally. Like you know, there's like lots of it's like, you know, the US and Canada. There are like two countries that are extremely similar. But due to the fact that like the neoliberal experiment in Argentina was like gruesomely unsuccessful, like there's not even like it was like not even a dime of success. At least in Chile, it was like implemented in a way that like led to moderate successes, which is why people are like fans of capitalism there, basically, right? In Argentina, it was a disaster. Like straight up disaster. Like anytime they tried the neoliberal experiment, it like failed so badly that it became kind of the test case for how badly free markets can fail. So that's why a lot of these like more conservative like ideologues, they love Chile, because it's like a country where some of these like theories about like free markets and neoliberalism, it's not that they were like perfect, but they had more moderate successes. So like they're gonna praise, like what people have to understand is like they're gonna praise Chile regardless, because a lot of people love the fact that Chile was like an experiment in free markets that like made it a success, kind of. And those successes are limited. Like, it's still a very unequal country, whatever. But they're still there. Just like they're here in the United States. It's the same. Like, we have had moderate successes, like under like a neoliberal system. So I think like the difference is like, yeah, if you get too much like become like you can ignore the parts of your economy that were saved by protectionism. You know, so like, you know, how the reason like Trump won so massively in 2016 was because he was against NAFTA. He said he was against NAFTA.
Yeah.
And NAFTA was massively unpopular, like everywhere. So you know, like a lot of these like libertarian, like, sorry, my dogs. They love Chile. Like, they're gonna like praise it and like shit talk on like Cuba and Venezuela or whatever, regardless. But I think it's more of a matter of like what they do in the next few years. It's like just like watching what they do and not so much what they say.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that some people are comparing Boric to AOC, but he was outside of their kind of corporate duopoly, right? Which, you know, AOC very much, you know, beholden to the Democratic Party. And yeah, so I thought that was kind of interesting that some people were comparing him to AOC. And I did see the recent elections in Argentina. Their left front, kind of their leftist coalition, they actually elected or they have now 4 socialists in Congress. But yeah, Jacobin is supposedly ignoring that story for some reason, which is kind of interesting.
Let my dogs out.
Sure.
But I saw that video of yours.
But not, yeah, super surprising, because they like, you know, they claim to kind of be like this socialist leftist magazine, but they definitely seem to be very beholden to kind of the Democratic Party. They had this op-ed where they were defending Jamal, you know, Bowman, voting to give, you know, Israel more money for their Iron Dome. He went and did like a kind of PR, you know, trip to the apartheid state of Israel. And then they had this op-ed saying no, like, because there was this DSA chapter voting to like kick him out because, like, you know, he's doing all these horrible things that they, you know, stand against. And yeah, so I just thought that was, yeah, kind of interesting. But I know,
did they ignore it because it was, or just because they forgot to mention it? Because it's just another country, probably. Maybe they're just not following the
well, the article from Left Voice on this was basically talking about how they're focusing on you know, leftists or socialists you know, doing pretty well or not even doing so well in other places in elections. I think they focused on maybe like Germany or Sweden, a couple of these Nordic countries, while, you know, the socialist movement in Argentina, like at least electorally, has done a lot better than these other countries. So it seems kind of interesting why Jacobin was highlighting these, you know, other socialist leftist movements in these countries that weren't doing as well, while completely ignoring Argentina. And the argument that the author was making was basically because Argentina, they're working outside of the corporate, you know, duopoly, and they kind of want to create change maybe within the Democratic Party, and they're kind of beholden to that model. And the model in Argentina shows like, no, you can actually get leftists elected outside of you know, kind of major parties, if you will.
Well, I think it's like 2 things. One, there's definitely like, you know, this because like I know that you know this from like your previous videos. There's like an element of people that followed Bernie Sanders that they're kind of like Nordic socialists, kind of. They want Medicare for all, whatever, but they don't really have anything positive to say about like any country in the global South, like not just Argentina, also like African countries, Asian countries. Like you'll never hear them praise like how Vietnam dealt with the pandemic. That's like a communist country, and they they dealt with it pretty well, but you're not going to hear them like praise Vietnam. Like those kinds of people, I would consider David Pakman one of them, or like even Kyle a little bit. Not as much as David Pakman, but like Kyle Kalinske, humans, and they're focused on the like European countries, because at the end of the day, they're still like very biased against like all of these other countries in the world, like that have had kind of left successes, and they act like they don't want to compare the United States to any of those countries, and they don't want to be like smeared by association with like Cuba and Venezuela or whatever, because they feel like, and I think part of this is true, they feel like it'll tarnish their ability to win an election, and they're very electorally focused anyway. So that's like a big part of it. I wouldn't say, I think like the mistake that people make with Argentina is to act like there's a corporate duopoly. It's not really the same as in the US, because it really depends on who gets elected. So there's like, basically in Argentina, there's like the Conservative Party, who like, they were like frequently allied with like the dictatorships and stuff, same as in Chile. And then there's like the Peronist Party, which is like the center left, which isn't really part of the duopoly. It's the majority party. It's like basically like the center left in Argentina is so extremely popular that they've had to like basically like instill coups to like kick them out because like everybody votes for them. Identity politics, even though there's like a lot of white people in Argentina, failed drastically, because since it was like kind of a neoliberal experiment, people are like really anti-neoliberalism in general, and they're completely unable to split up the population with these ideas of like, you know, Republican versus Democrat. This is like kind of a cultural thing in the United States. Over there, it's like poor versus rich. Like there's none of these ideas about, there's also racism in the country, but like really like they've been unable to split the working class in two the way they have here. So there's no duopoly. It's like 70 to 80% are center left, like period, of the population. Some of those people will vote third party in like local elections, because they realize like the Peronist Party, which is like the majority support, has like made concessions to neoliberalism. And depending on who got elected, like the worst one was Carlos Menem in 2001 or whatever. He's the one that he came out of the Peronist Party, but he was like extremely right-wing fiscally and like a neoliberal, basically. He was like the Joe Biden of Argentina. So he was extremely unpopular. He came out of the Peronist Party, but the Kirchners are not neoliberal. They definitely make concessions to neoliberalism, but they're nowhere near neoliberal like the way that Joe Biden would be, or the way that Menem was. So that's why they were able to get elected 3 times in a row. Like in the US, that's unheard of. It would basically be like having Obama plus Obama another term plus Hillary plus like Hillary another term. That would never happen in the US. And the reason for that is because the Democrats are really a neoliberal party. In Argentina, it's like a center-left party that isn't that great, but also is not a neoliberal party. So that's why they keep getting elected, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, because it sounds like they're actually, a good part of their governance is actually in the best interest of the people, hence why they're so popular, right?
They're still extremely popular. The center-left, not the socialists or whatever. I feel like, but like with younger people here, it's like a lot of younger people want to call themselves socialists or communists because they want to make it clear that they're not interested in being Democrats anymore, that it's over. You know, that they're really done with it. And like, I understand that. I feel like you can be over with it without necessarily being like like what they did in Argentina was basically, even for the last election, the one that Alberto Fernandez and Cristina Kirchner won. They what they did was like a coalition between the center left and the third parties, basically, and they called it something else. It was called Frente de Todos, which means coalition for everyone. So that was like, they have to make these coalitions before the election in order to win the support of people that will just like randomly vote for a third party. And you know, that's like another lesson. It's like, if you're on a third party, you don't necessarily have to win the election, but like any kind of pressure that you can put by actually being a third party, because over there they're actual third parties. It's not like they're part of the, and there's like a million of them. I've like lost track of how many third parties there are. There's a lot of them. And here it's like there's a few, and they don't even bother to like put pressure or withhold their votes or anything. So it's like there's no fear from the Democratic Party. Like, that's the problem.
Yeah. It's like, even if we had a third party that got maybe 5 to 10% of, you know, the vote on these presidential, you know, elections, it would definitely force the, you know, both corporate parties to come to the left a little bit, just out of necessity and survival, right? And it's an interesting comment from Bill. It says, I honestly think the biggest difference between the US and almost any other nation is that the US has the most sophisticated propaganda machine in the world has ever seen, and is used to divide us. I think that's pretty accurate from my experience. We're just constantly being bombarded with, you know, a lot of bullshit, both, you know, from the government and from the corporate media. Point well taken, Bill. Yeah, I know you probably have to get going soon. So, is there anything else you wanted to share real quickly?
I wanted to ask you about all of this, like growing fruits and vegetables that you do.
Sure.
Do you, so like, how much space do you have to grow stuff?
So I have a small backyard, that I just have like some kind of pots and like grow bags in. And then I'm also super advantaged to have like this little food forest I created on my dad's property, which is maybe a quarter of an acre, maybe a little bit smaller than that. And I've been planting, you know, fruit trees, berry bushes. Let's see, I have like a greenhouse I built there a few years ago, and like some raised beds and stuff. So super privileged to have access to that. And hopefully, me and my partner are looking into hopefully getting a house at some point with a little bit of property, because we're just renting right now. But ideally, I want to get a house sooner than later that has some property to kind of have, you know, more space that's not on kind of somebody else's property, because I don't necessarily know what, because my dad's always talking about wanting to move and sell. And I don't know if he'd be giving me a family discount necessarily. So I don't know if I'd be able to buy that from him. But yeah, that's kind of what I have going on right now. And I also thought about probably getting a couple of plots at the local like community garden this next year, and then kind of growing some stuff there as well.
I have like a friend who he lives in NYCHA, so he tried to he like raised money and stuff to put a garden in one of the
Awesome.
plots, and it looked like it was gonna work, but it turns out like the soil there is not good. It like for growing, and there's so much space over there to grow stuff actually, like in the projects. But something's wrong with the soil.
Okay.
So I actually, so they had to like make raised beds kind of to plant things specifically.
Yeah.
But I actually wanted to ask you if you could talk to them, and because like, you know, they're like from the city, they don't really know necessarily how to grow things. And I think it'd be cool to have like some fruit trees.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe trees might work better than like smaller plants that need good soil. But I don't know how you would make sure that they grow.
Yeah, I mean, fruit trees, at least from my experience, seem a little bit less, picky as long as they're getting, enough sun, and depending on how hot or dry it is there, maybe water every once in a while. And most fruit trees don't like super kind of wet areas. They don't like the roots getting wet necessarily, but as long as, they have sun, a little bit of water, they should do pretty good. And also, like just putting wood chips around them, putting cardboard down, and then wood chips over it, kind of like around the outside base of the tree, is super helpful as well for keeping like weeds away, and also for keeping kind of moisture in, and it just kind of creates really good soil for the fruit tree. But yeah, I think fruit trees are really awesome because like they're perennials. Once they start producing, they're going to produce fruit for a while. So yeah, definitely getting some fruit trees there I think would be really awesome.
Okay, so I can can I send him your
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Totally.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm always, that's something I want to try to do more of on my channel, is talk about growing food and different ways to do it. Just super important. Like people have to eat, and it just,
It's a good way to save money.
Yeah, no, totally. Like there's have a couple of persimmon fruit trees on my dad's property, and I probably got like 70 to 80 pounds of fruit just from those two trees. And even non-organic persimmons at the store, like $3 a pound. So that was a couple $100 in fruit from fruit trees that costed maybe $35 when I bought them, several years ago. So they definitely pay for themselves very easily. So well, thank you so much for coming on the channel, and just maybe shout out where people can find you.
Oh sure. I have a channel. It's called Blue Moon Red Wine. I only like do like one episode a week or 2 episodes a week. So you don't have to be like devoted to watching it all the time. And then I'm on Twitter, BMRW show. That's it.
Awesome. Thanks again. This is fun.
Bye.
Bye.